Did you notice this hidden details in the background? Or what about this one? I rewatched the entire One Piece at 0.25 speed and found 22 hidden details that you definitely missed. During Fishman Island, Luffy became a hero to all the local children, and at one point, Jinbei casually mentions that he'll get them straw hats just like his. It seems like a completely throwaway line, but if you fast forward more than 250 chapters later, Oda quietly pays it off. In the background, every single one of those kids can be seen wearing tiny straw hats. But that's not even the craziest Fishman Island secret. Earlier in the arc, Sanji starts imagining what Nami would look like as a mermaid, so Luffy draws a hilariously bad sketch of her. At first, it's just a quick joke. However, nearly 600 chapters later during Otohime's flashback, Oda secretly hides the exact same drawing in the background behind the kids. You 100% missed this small secret in the One Piece movie Red. Near the end of the movie, while Shanks is trying to give Uta medicine, if you watch it in slow motion in this exact frame, you can see that this medicine was produced in 1997. But why is this important? Well, it's because this is the same year that One Piece started publishing. Okay, this detail was so small I honestly doubt anyone noticed it while watching the movie at normal speed. But this next one is really hard to find in episode 8, a detail during Buggy's flashback. In episode 8 here, while Buggy is preparing to eat his devil fruit, you can see this guy in the audience. Notice something weird about him? His shirt has the exact same pattern and color as Luffy's Gomu Gomu no Mi, and it was an interesting find. But not as interesting as this one during the battle between the Blackbeard pirates and the Marines. Garp landed a devastating punch directly on Jesus Burgess's right arm. At the time, it just looked like another insane Garp moment. However, if we fast forward all the way to Dressrosa, you'll notice something interesting. Burgess is suddenly wearing a large piece of armor protecting that exact same arm. It means Garp hit Burgess so hard that the injury was still affecting him years later. However, the most shocking one of Luffy's childhood flashbacks. If you look closely at the shirt he's wearing, you'll notice it says Tamago Giken. The phrase roughly translates to egg incident. Now here's where things get interesting. Years later, Oda introduced Egghead Island and the world-shaking event known as the Egghead Incident. This one detail will blow your mind during Captain Ku's backstory that I'm sure most of you missed. In this scene, after Ku defeats all the Marines on the ship, he chooses to leave only this blonde guy alive, but not before breaking its jaw. Well, what if I tell you that this random Marine grew up to be Axe-Hand Morgan from Shelltown? The reason he has metal jaws becomes obvious now, but this was an insane secret during Sanji vs. Queen in Wano. In episode 1061, Sanji kicks Queen so hard that her tattoo started crying. If you slow the scene down, you can actually see Queen's tattoo changing faces from the impact. At one point, the face on his tattoo literally looks like it's crying in pain after Sanji's attack. The man wearing Spandam's mask in episode 250 looks almost identical to the one worn by WWE wrestler Mick Foley during his Mankind persona. At the start of One Piece, pirates were often shown drinking from normal beer mugs. However, as the series went on, those mugs were quietly replaced with these barrel-shaped cups instead. Now, there's actually a pretty interesting reason behind it. Since most of the Straw Hats weren't even old enough to legally drink when the series began, the anime likely changed the mugs so it wouldn't look like they were constantly drinking alcohol. After repeatedly using the raid suit, Sanji's dormant Germa modifications finally began to awaken. Now, everyone noticed the boost in durability and strength, but very few people noticed what happened to his face. If you compare scenes before and after his awakening, you'll see that Sanji's signature eyebrow curl actually changes direction. Nobody noticed this tiny detail hidden inside Kizaru's office. For less than a second, you can see a few words written on the wall behind him. The text reads unclear justice or uncertain justice. This is actually the personal form of justice that Kizaru follows. Unlike characters such as Akainu or Aokiji who have strong beliefs about what's right and wrong, Kizaru always seems indifferent and never takes anything too seriously. During the Little Garden arc, Nami can briefly be seen reading a book called Bragman. At first, I didn't think much of it. However, much later during Robin's backstory, the exact same book appears again. So naturally, I got curious and looked into it. It turns out, Bragman is a famous adventure book within the One Piece world that documents voyages across the Grand Line, including all the strange creatures. It's a tiny world-building detail that most fans completely miss. Here's a really fun detail hidden in Egghead. If you take a look at one of the buildings on the island from above, its shape looks surprisingly familiar. In fact, many fans noticed that it closely resembles a Super Nintendo controller. Considering Egghead is packed with references to technology, inventions, and futuristic gadgets, this could be a deliberate deliberate Easter egg from Oda. Of course, it's never been officially confirmed. In One Piece's openings, during the scene where all of the Straw Hats are walking together, it looks like a normal montage at first. However, if you pay close attention to the floor beneath them, you'll notice that each section represents a different arc from the series. This tiled floor comes from Logtown, this one references Eni's lobby, then we have Thriller Bark, Shabandi, and several others. What's even cooler is that every time the Straw Hats step onto a new floor, their outfits instantly change to the clothes they wore during that specific arc. If you pay attention to the floors throughout the island, you'll notice they resemble the glowing digital grid pattern seen in Tron. Considering Egghead is the most futuristic location in One Piece, this could be a subtle nod to the classic movie. Did you know that Oda secretly foreshadowed Wano all the way back during Marineford? When Ace gives Little Ors Jr. a giant straw hat, he casually mentions that he learned how to make them in Wano. At the time, it seemed like a completely random line. However, years later, we learned that Ace had actually spent time there with Tama and the villagers long before the Straw Hats ever reached the country. Here's a detail that most fans completely missed during Zoro's Wano fights. At normal speed, his Conqueror's hockey effects just look like a burst of green energy. However, if you slow the scene down frame by frame, some fans notice that the hockey trails appear to form the letters of Zoro's name. It's an incredibly subtle detail that's only visible for a split second. Now this is a suspicious detail I noticed while watching anime in 0.25x during Zoro's fight against King. As Zoro's green flames explode across the screen, everything moves so fast that it's impossible to see at normal speed. However, if you slow the scene down frame by frame, you'll spot something absolutely ridiculous. One of the flame shapes looks exactly like an Among Us crewmate. It's only visible for a split second before disappearing, but once you see it, you can never unsee it. Now here's a hidden detail connecting Whitebeard and Blackbeard that most fans never notice. Whitebeard's real name is Edward Newgate, while Blackbeard's real name is Marshall D. Teach. At first, these names don't seem related at all. However, if you take Whitebeard's first name, Edward, and combine it with Blackbeard's last name, Teach, you get Edward Teach, the real name of the legendary pirate Blackbeard from history. By far, one of the most interesting secrets in slow-mo has to be this one here. Kaido uses one of his signature attacks against Luffy, Boar Breath, and just as he released it, this frame can be seen. Do you notice anything weird here? I also didn't notice it at first, but if you look at the laser beam, the name of Kaido's attack is written on it, Oro Breath.